Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something super fascinating, how the armor we built to survive our past can actually end up weighing us down today. We're going to explore how we can transition from that heavy, defensive armor to building a really grounded, anchored future. It's an incredible psychological journey, so let's just dive right in.
So here's a question for you. Are you protecting your peace, or are you just pushing everyone away? You know what I mean, right? It's this massive trend right now. The second things get tough, or someone says the wrong thing, the modern ethos tells us to just cut people off, ghost them, walk away. We're constantly told that distancing ourselves is the ultimate form of self-care. But psychology actually suggests a much deeper, way more complex realities at play here. When we sever ties at the very first sign of discomfort, we might actually be mistaking our old trauma responses for healthy boundaries.
To figure out why we do this, we really need to understand our invisible armor. The research shows us that childhood trauma doesn't just leave emotional scars, it quietly and fundamentally reshapes how a person thinks, responds, and protects themselves. But here's the wild part, the real paradox. Many adults with this background don't look broken at all. In fact, they're usually the most successful people in the room. You probably know someone exactly like this. Or, hey, maybe it's you, the strong friend who always has it together, who literally never drops the ball. Their trauma masquerades as this high-functioning resilience. They seem intensely dependable, but beneath that impressive strength are these really exhausting psychological patterns that were built purely for survival.
Okay, let's look at one of the most common forms of this armor, hypervigilance. If you grew up in an unpredictable, stressful, or emotionally unsafe environment, your brain was literally wired to constantly search for danger. And for a lot of people, that alarm system just never fully switched off. This means you might instantly detect minute emotional changes in others. We're talking about a tiny shift in someone's tone of voice on the phone, a fleeting micro-expression across the dinner table, or a sudden change in the energy of a room. What's completely invisible to everyone else is glaringly obvious to you. It's not just anxiety or overthinking, it's a deeply ingrained survival response. You are subconsciously reading of the room at all times to ensure you're safe. And man, that takes a massive toll on your daily energy reserves.
And that heightened awareness, it often leads straight into the next adaptation, which is known as parentification. Basically, it's an emotional role reversal. As a child, you might have learned that managing other people's emotions, keeping them happy or calm or distracted, was the only way to keep yourself safe. Fast forward to adulthood, and this past survival tactic often turns into chronic, deeply rooted people-pleasing. You don't just empathize with others, you actually feel personally responsible for their emotional stability. The internal monologue is just exhausting. If someone around you is in a bad mood, you immediately assume you did something wrong, or you feel this overwhelming obligation to fix it. You carry immense guilt anytime someone is upset, even when it has absolutely nothing to do with you.
Now this leads to a really counterintuitive experience called the uncomfortable peace. Think about it. When stress and chaos are your baseline normal from a young age, your brain actually learns to associate high-pressure environments with familiarity. So what happens when things are actually calm? Well, quiet moments end up triggering the nervous system. Stability feels like a temporary illusion, like you're just sitting there waiting for the other shoe to drop. Rest can even trigger intense feelings of guilt or anxiety. Because of this, people with this background often deliberately stay busy, distracted, and guarded. They take on extra projects at work or fill their weekends with obligations. And it's not because they inherently love pressure, but because their body learned early on that constant alertness meant survival, and stillness feels dangerously vulnerable.
What's really interesting here is how this completely flips our idea of independence on its head. We call it defensive self-reliance. Society loves to heap praise on fierce independence, right? We celebrate hustle culture, the lone wolf mentality, people who never seem to need a single soul. And sure, it looks incredibly impressive from the outside. But when we dig into the underlying psychology, this trait actually grew from sheer necessity rather than preference. When early emotional support was inconsistent or unavailable or conditional, your brain adapted. It protected you by suppressing your own needs and teaching you to handle absolutely everything alone. It's a defense mechanism that screams, I won't be let down if I never rely on anyone, which makes it incredibly difficult and sometimes physically uncomfortable to simply ask for help today.
But because of all that intense self-reliance and hyper-awareness, survivors often develop exceptional empathy. Having experienced profound emotional pain firsthand, you develop a uniquely heightened emotional awareness. You just naturally know exactly how to comfort others. You listen without judgment, and you can recognize unspoken pain in a friend before they even say a word. But there's a really heartbreaking irony here, because expressing your own emotions once felt unsafe, maybe your feelings were ignored or minimized or actively criticized in the past, you end up comforting everyone else while quietly hiding your own personal pain. You essentially become everyone else's therapist, but you carry your own burdens in total secrecy, convinced that your struggles are just too heavy for anyone else to hold.
And that brings us to this absolutely crucial realization from our sources. Survival strategies are not permanent personality traits. Let that really sink in for a second. The behaviors that once saved you, the armor that protected you when you were vulnerable, they aren't always the tools that are going to help you thrive and heal today. This is a profound psychological pivot point. Just because you can handle everything alone doesn't mean you're meant to. You do not have to spend your entire life carrying the weight of the world in silence. You absolutely deserve the freedom to finally put the armor down and rest.
So how does this play out today? Well, when that defensive self-reliance crashes into modern relationship advice, we often fall into the isolation trap. The internet is absolutely flooded with advice telling you to protect your peace by just walking away from anyone who brings negativity into your life. But a lot of the time, people with this invisible armor distance themselves not because their friends are actually toxic, but out of sheer emotional exhaustion. When you're hypervigilant, carrying everyone's emotional baggage, and completely self-reliant, of course human interaction feels exhausting. But cutting everyone off doesn't actually cure the exhaustion, it just replaces it with profound loneliness. Over time, this well-meaning habit of retreating traps you in a completely isolated life.
We have to make a really important distinction here. Toxic abuse versus occasional friction. Look, if someone is truly abusive, manipulative, or consistently violates your safety, stepping away is 100% the healthiest and most necessary decision. But real-life relationships, they're wonderfully, inherently messy and complex. Friends argue, families misunderstand each other. People have bad days and snap and say things they don't mean. Occasional conflict is a normal, unavoidable part of every single healthy human connection. Labeling every disagreement or moment of friction as toxic completely skips over the normal, necessary work of building a genuine relationship.
So the way out of this trap, it's understanding the vital difference between avoidance and actual boundaries. Completely cutting people off at the first sign of trouble, that's avoidance. It's a temporary relief that usually leads straight to long-term isolation. Boundaries, on the other hand, are the psychological guidelines that help you stay connected safely. A boundary isn't a massive brick wall to keep everyone out, it's more like a bridge with a toll booth. Setting a boundary might just mean choosing not to answer text messages while you're recharging on a Sunday afternoon, or calmly stepping away from a conversation the second it turns into a shouting match. It's a way to preserve your inner peace without severing the relationship entirely.
And setting those boundaries is absolutely huge for combating emotional overload. Remember that trauma response we talked about? Feeling responsible for everyone else's feelings? That leads directly to this state of draining stress, the deep-seated belief that you have to always listen, always rescue, or always solve other people's problems. It's that physical sense of dread you feel when a certain needy person's name pops up on your phone. You have to realize that you do not have to be available for everyone 24/7. Saying, "Hey, I can't discuss this right now," or "I need some time for myself today," is not a selfish act. It is vital, necessary energy protection. Like they say, you cannot pour from an empty cup.
Another really effective tool for your peace is managing levels of access. Relationships naturally exist in different concentric layers. Think of your life like a venue. You've got the VIP section, and then you've got general admission. The stress begins when we expect everyone we meet to belong in our closest, most trusted VIP inner circle. And then we feel totally betrayed when they fall short. But you know what? You don't need to completely erase someone from your life just because they aren't fully trustworthy with your deepest, darkest secrets. Instead, just adjust their access. Manage how much time, trust, and emotional investment you give to casual acquaintances versus your closest, proven friends.
Now let's walk through a practice that can be a real game changer: emotional detachment. And hey, this does not mean becoming cold, cynical, or robotic. It really boils down to 3 empowering steps. Step 1. Refuse to absorb every external emotion around you. If a coworker is having a terrible day and snapping at everyone, you don't have to make their foul mood your own. Step 2. Remember that criticism doesn't define your worth. Someone's opinion of you is usually way more about their own perspective than your reality. And step 3. Learn to observe situations without instantly taking them personally. This is exactly how emotionally resilient people stay steady, calm, and anchored during really stressful moments.
A massive part of that emotional detachment, letting go of control. Honestly, one of the absolute biggest sources of relationship stress and emotional burnout is trying to change someone else.
desperately wanting them to see your perspective, or validate your past pain, or respond perfectly to your needs. We spend so much energy writing scripts for how other people should behave. But psychology consistently shows that lasting change only happens when people choose it for themselves. To truly protect your peace, you have to let go of the exhausting illusion that you can control others. You just have to focus entirely on what is actually within your power: your own reactions, your own healing, and your own healthy boundaries.
So if there's one overarching takeaway from all the research we've unpacked today, it's this: real peace isn't built through isolation. Building walls and hiding away might feel safe for a minute, but it's a really lonely kind of safety. True peace is built by staying emotionally balanced. It's the deep realization that you don't have to carry the weight of the world or manage everyone else's emotions all on your own anymore. You deserve genuine peace, emotional security, and the freedom to finally rest. By putting down that armor and picking up healthy boundaries, you can actually nurture the genuine, beautiful connections that matter in your life.
I want to leave you with a final, really important question to think about today, straight from our source material. Which survival trait felt most familiar to you, and which one are you finally ready to let go of? Take a moment today to reflect on your own invisible armor. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this sparks a deep curiosity to keep learning about your own incredible mind.